All right, y'all. So real quick. So in summary, I bought this truck here off Facebook Marketplace. It's a 2011 Chevy Silverado 3500. I bought it off a gentleman who lives about 45 minutes from me. But anyways, I bought it off the gentleman, and he was telling me that the truck was running terribly. It was running very terrible. And this was his spare vehicle. He had another diesel Duramax Chevy. But anyway, this was his backup, and he was selling it for $5,000. I did buy the car for $5,000. I did not, he was not budging. I didn't even attempt, honestly. I just got it. It's a 6.0 Vortec gasser. It's not diesel. You could see it's pretty cool. And this is actually not how it looked. These were pictures he took, unfortunately, when he first bought it. When I got it, it was a bit more beat up. But anyways, exterior-wise. But anyways, I'm interested in, it's a work truck for me, so I don't really care what it looks like. But nevertheless, long story short, the gentleman, he changed out a few parts. He claims O2 sensors and alternator and a few other things. However, again, that didn't solve or resolve the issue. So the point of this video here is to try to document how I was able to diagnose this vehicle and figure out what's going on. Alright, so here's a few of the codes that were shown on the vehicle. Again, these were all mostly O2 sensor codes. Which again, the problem with the car was related to the fuel trims. It was running very at a pure rich. You would smell fuel from out the exhaust. But I'll go to more detail on that in a moment. But nevertheless, it was throwing codes for open circuit, O2 sensors, and slow responses, just all your O2 sensor codes. I end up clearing all that and to see whether they come back. And of course, the open circuit voltage signal codes came back. Again, and they were intermittent. They weren't, constant. But anyways, what I ended up doing is I just left that alone for a moment. I said, let me go look at the air. Let me check to see what the intake, whether I got any vacuum leaks and stuff. So here's an image of the mass airflow sensor. So I learned something new. These mass airflow sensors actually are frequency sensors. They produce a frequency that corresponds to the mass airflow. So here's some plots of those, and I was verifying that what the frequency the computer was measuring was in fact the frequency that I would measure with an external oscilloscope counter setting enabled. So I was able to confirm that the mass airflow was reading properly from this test here. Alright, so now if you're using this video as reference, I do want to note, so if you see the frequency in this plot, you see it's like 6.67 kilohertz. The computer was either reading half of that or double. I believe it was half of that value. So there was a discrepancy of a factor of 2. I couldn't recall where it came from, but nevertheless, I just want to note in case you're using this video as reference. Nevertheless, I zoomed out so I can get more of those pulses and get a more accurate frequency measurement because, the more pulses, the more accurate the measurement can be. But nevertheless, next photo I wanted to say, so what this actually ended me going down a path of a dead end, but I said, hey, I noticed the mass airflow was actually reading higher than it was supposed to. Just using the rule of, I forget, the displacement of the engine is supposed to have, something per second based on if it's a 6.0 liter, it's supposed to be something around 6 units per second. But anyway, nevertheless, I noticed that it was reading a little high. I said, oh, whoa, okay, the mass airflow seems to be reading a little high. I wonder, do I got an air leak? So I did a leak down test, and a smoke test, and I seen I didn't have any air leaks. And I said, okay, well, if it's reading kind of high, that might be a dirty sensor or whatever. I cleaned the sensor off, and it still was reading high. So I actually went out and bought, and here you go, going up Part Mountain at this point. I went and bought a cheap Amazon mass airflow just to see whether it had the same behavior as the stock one, and it did. So at that point, I said, you know what? I don't think mass airflow is the problem here. Now this photo here kind of gave it away. So this is 1.40 pound per minute for this truck. Typically 0.8 to 0.9 is where the range you want to be at idle. But this one so clearly was reading high. So but however, again, this was a dead end. I eventually found out that, again, it had no vacuum leaks. This was in fact caused, the truck was doing this. It actually was opening the throttle, and when it opens the throttle body, of course, it pulls more air, and it was doing that because the truck was misfiring and dying and was trying to keep itself on. So again, a dead end here. So I concluded I had no mass airflow problem. So next step, I actually went and started looking at combustion waveform. So you can kind of see in that plot. Now here's again, you can pay attention to the line that's purple. The yellow is just an inverted signal. So the signal is inverted. So I had inverted. I used the math function in the oscilloscope to invert the signal to make it positive, so I can look at it. So these are both the same signal. It's just one's up, one's down. So for simplicity, let's just look at the purple one. Or pink, whatever color it is. Nevertheless, what this waveform shows you is pretty much exactly what's happening in the cylinder. This one was on cylinder 2. But anyway, you can kind of see, you gotta, I don't want to go too deep. These combustion waveforms, firing waveforms, these themselves are complicated and need their own video. But long story short, nothing was looking too strange. I mean, this was kind of pointing to me thinking that it was running rich because the waveform has like a long tail. Typically, when all the gasoline is burnt out of the cylinder, you kind of get like a tail with like a whip that goes back up at the end. For more leaner conditions. But, this one minus the little blip there in the middle. But anyways, it kind of looked what I was expecting. Now, this immediately pointed me directly back to the fuel trims. I went back to the fuel trims. I said, all right, let me see what the computer's reading and what's actually happening. So in the next photo, you're going to see pretty much the fuel trims. And again, it had a fuel trim issue. What was actually happening is it was actually, and I thought too, but the truck was actually running rich. And as an indication, you would see the long-term fuel trend be negative, especially for cylinder 1, as you can see. And that would indicate that there's too much gasoline. The truck is trying to back off the gasoline on the combustion, so it's going to pull back on the fuel trim there in the long term and the short term. Long term is more of an average over time. But anyways, it's pulling back on that. And I was saying, oh, okay, well, the truck is running rich, so it's going to pull back. Okay, so again, air is fine. Spark, I forgot to mention, I did check spark and everything, camshaft, all that looked good. So this was strictly, the truck thinking it's running rich, and as a result of that, it was backing off the fuel, and eventually backing off so much that the truck would actually die out. Now, I thought it was dying out from running rich, because I would hear like snap, crackling, and popping exhaust. Like I thought it was like extra gasoline left in the cylinder that was firing off. But anyways, what was the clear giveaway for me was eventually I just plotted out the whole Bank 1 fuel trim for the whole controller. So inputs, outputs, to see what was causing what and see where the causality was. And you can see that in this next plot here. Alright, now this is what did it for me. Now here you can see pretty much I plotted out the short-term fuel trim, which is the blue line. I plotted out the pulse width, modulated pulse width of the injector for Bank 1. I believe upstream and downstream sensors. Now, the important thing here is I held the truck at 1,000 RPM, and it was slightly missing. And I said, okay, because it's running rich, it's going to be missing. And the computer's constantly trying to subtract fuel. And the fuel trim was negative, like 30 in this case. You can see by the plot there. Then all of a sudden, as I'm watching this, I noticed the computer increase the fuel trim from negative 30 up to negative 15. As in, which means it's adding fuel to the cylinders for bank one. When it did that, that's that blip there. You see that top little, that blue plot just increased there like a hill. When it did that, the darn truck jumped from 1,000 RPM up to 2,000 RPM and was no longer struggling. And then, of course, you can see it goes, the blip goes back down and it starts kind of running a bit rough again. Well, that was strange to me because this whole time I thought the truck was running rich, and I'm saying, hey, if it's running rich, then why would adding fuel, increasing the fuel trim from -35 to -15, again, adding fuel to the cylinder, why would that cause it to jump up in RPM? I would suspect it to bog down more because it's getting too much fuel. So again, tracking that when the fuel trim went less negative, so it's from -30 to -15, of course, right after that, cause and effect, that's the cause. The effect is the pulse width modulation of the injector also increased. So the actual injector pulse width increased. You can see that in the plot too. And then when the injector increased, of course, now is injecting more fuel in the cylinder, and the cylinder jumped up in RPM. And I looked at the O2 sensors, and the O2 sensors for upstream, that's the one that's most important for the closed loop for fuel regulation of fuel trims, at least for this truck. That rose a little. And that's where I said to myself, okay, I'm no longer believing what this O2 sensor is providing. I see the truck commanding more fuel. I see the injectors open up, or rather have a longer duration of opening. And so which means fuel is going to the cylinder, and I noticed the RPM jumps, but the O2 sensor for bank one did not correspond or increase proportional to that. So I said, okay, well, this gentleman said he replaced O2 sensors. Perhaps he put cheap O2 sensors on here. Maybe he didn't put the wideband O2 sensors or narrowband, I forget which band it is, that it needs in order to operate correctly. So I said, okay, I'll go up further up Part Mountain. So again, I've already put a mass airflow in from Amazon. I said, okay, well, let's go get O2 sensor. And then O2 sensors was $110 for this, just for bank one, sensor one upstream. So I went to the parts store, got that, threw it on, and lo and behold, truck ran great. Wow. I was quite shocked. Turned the truck on, let it get warm, ran fine. That fuel trim, no longer -35. It was within plus, it was within 10, or even it was closer than that. It was almost close to zero. Long-term fuel trim was like -3, bouncing around 0, plus or minus 3, which is apparently a healthy bank for fuel regulation. So again, reason for making this video is, to try to help anyone that's got a 2011 3500 Silverado or anything in that matter with a fuel trim issue. Definitely, O2 sensors are important. Upstream O2 sensors are important. Getting the correct sensor, the sensor that is for the, proper sensor for that truck and for the application. There's different types of O2 sensors out there, I've learned here. There's wideband, narrowband. There's cheap, there's expensive. I want to note that, again, I changed out only one of the sensors here. So, I want to now pull up a plot of what both sensors, the old sensor that's on bank 2 upstream, and now the new sensor I replaced that's on bank 1 upstream. I want to show you the difference now with these two sensors, with the data plotted, shown here. All right, so here's a plot of both sensors, the replaced sensor and the still old sensor on the truck. Notice the new sensor, which is the one there bouncing around up and down blue, is bouncing between, rich and lean conditions, which is what a upstream O2 sensor is supposed to do. It's supposed to bounce around. It's supposed to be very volatile. And look at the one that's on there, the older one. You see how that's running just stagnant, that's not how it's supposed to operate. And in fact, after I replaced bank 1, now I have an issue now. Well, bank 2 always had an issue. They both did, but bank 2 has the same issue, you know. So most likely I'm going to point it to, I haven't fixed it yet, but I'm going to point it to the O2 sensor. I believe once I swap that O2 sensor out on bank 2, is that I'll resolve all these issues, and I'll probably end up, end up fixing the truck. That's what was the issue. It had some cheap O2 sensors on there that weren't good, and I had to go out and go get the proper sensor for the truck. So, here I got a truck, 3500 again, for $5,000. Got about 200,000 miles on it. I think a little less maybe. But anyways, got a pretty decent truck for $5,000. I'll be putting it to work, and this video is intended to kind of help anyone that's also troubleshooting. Again, similar issue there. So, hope this video helps, and as always, thanks.